Hi, it's Claire and welcome to Needle Say More. Today I'm going to show you how to construct and top stitch the iris undies. It's really important that you pin your pieces together correctly. If you get something stitched incorrectly on these, it's very difficult to unpick the power mesh and the jersey, and you might end up with holes if you do manage to unpick it. So the best way to make sure that you're stitching everything together correctly is if you lay all the pieces flat as they were going to look together. So here you can see I've laid the side panels out on the side, on either side of the main panel in the middle, and then I'm folding them inwards so that the right sides are facing, and then I'm pinning along the seam line with pins. This will just make the next step so much easier, because sometimes when you sat at your sewing machine you think you've got the right bit, before you know it you've sewn, and then it's really difficult to unpick, and then you may have to trim the seam allowance, which will make them smaller, or you might end up with holes where you've tried to unpick it. So with the power mesh and the jersey, it's best just to sew it once, but get it right first time. So you can see here, all the panels have been laid out and then they're folded into the middle, right sides facing. So I've got the central piece that we attached the gusset to in the previous video. The 4 panels of power mesh. The front panels will be smaller than the back panels in the power mesh. This is to allow the curve at the front of the leg. If, as you're pinning the side panels together, you are worried that the edges aren't looking right, sometimes there's almost like a triangular piece hanging down, the best way to check your work is to put the pins in and then open the seam out as it will when it's sewn, and just check how it looks when it's opened out. Sometimes when the panels have been cut to allow for curves, it may look as though the bottom doesn't line up, but actually when the seam is sewn, the bottom of the seams will hit each other at the right point if it's curves going in opposite directions, and when it's opened out it will be the correct shape. So you kind of just have to trust the process a little bit. Once all the panels are pinned together, check again, because we don't want to be getting it in the wrong place and having to unpick on this impossible fabric. You are going to use a stretch stitch, your choice, and I've got a video for that which I can link in the comments. Remember to start 1 centimetre in from the raw edge, so all the way down the length of the seam, and then when you get to the bottom you can go back and on the stitch line by flipping over the fabric and sewing over the final piece of the seam, so you shouldn't have any gaps in your seam. So you're going to need to do this 4 times. So stitch together the side panels to the front panel, twice on the front, twice on the back, so 4 in total. And I wouldn't stitch the side seams at this point. I would leave it so that you can open the undies completely flat. This will make top stitching in the next step so much easier, because you're going to be able to lay the fabric flat, hold the fabric taut and get a really neat top stitch. So just pause doing the side seams for now and we will come to them after we've done the top stitching. Once you've constructed the main part of the undies, we're going to start on top stitching. So you want to smooth the seam allowance over onto the side of the jersey. So this is the main panel of the undies, and we're going to put it onto a zigzag for the top stitching. Up until now I've been using the stretch stitch on my machine, which looks like the lightning bolt, but for the top stitching I'm going to swap onto a zigzag. So we're going to put all the seam allowance in towards the jersey panel, which is the main panel, and we're going to top stitch the seam allowance to the back of the jersey panel. So this is going to be visible on the outside of the garment, so you want to go really neatly. If you don't start from the very end, it should be okay in this scenario, because it is going to be covered with the lingerie elastic. However, if you have started a little gap in and you want to go back to the top of that seam just to reinforce it, you can do. So you can see in the video I am going back to the top of that seam and I'm doing the zigzag over the top just to reinforce it and make the seam really strong. So all of the seams that we've just sewn that attach the side panels to the main panel with the gusset, they are all going to be top stitched so that the fabric is towards the jersey side, and it's going to add a really professional finish to these. Once those 4 seams have been top stitched, you can lay the undies out and trim off any loose threads that you may have. You want it so it's right sides facing, so all the top stitching, all the right sides should be facing each other, and you're going to pin together along those side panels. So on mine it's the power mesh panels. I'm going to pin it together, and you should be able to see the shape of the undies start to take shape now. These side seams we aren't going to top stitch, we're just going to go back to our standard stretch stitch with the one we've been using that looks like the lightning bolt, and we're going to stitch the side of these to secure it. Again, with the power mesh you want to start about 1 centimetre in so the machine doesn't eat the fabric. So once you've sewn the side panels, you should have something that resembles a pair of undies. So you can see the sides are attached now. It's a really strong seam. Everything's looking great. You can see how it's starting to come together. At this point, don't worry if your gusset is still hanging around, because we haven't sewn the lingerie elastic onto the legs yet. So that will be secured down. So it's not going to be like having a tail, I promise.